Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Creative Insider podcast number 57 with me, Georgi. In this podcast episode, I had the pleasure to talk with American entrepreneurs and production studio designers and builders, Matt Alvarez from Soundshade AV Solutions and Drew Teague from Wrightsmith Studios. Matt and Drew have recently joined forces, and now they are real pioneers in the market of production studios in Texas in the US. And ironically, they have started their collaboration with the construction of none the less but the Joe Rogan Experience newest Austin studio, which you see on Spotify whenever you listen to the Joe Rogan Experience. We have talked a lot about the business and what they're doing and how the whole thing started. This is a little bit of behind the scenes of what is happening right in front of your eyes when you listen and watch to the biggest podcast in the world. So I really enjoyed the opportunity to be talking with them and to have this really nice information about the world of podcasting in the US. But before we start the conversation, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. And I want to remind you that if you want to support us, you can do that for free by subscribing to the platform you're listening to and leaving a good review or rate if possible. If you would like to stay in touch with what is going on in the show, we have a monthly newsletter and I suggest you to join it. You just can do that on thecreativeinsider.com. You find a link below. And by doing this now, if you subscribe now, we have created a freebie guide about how to organize your digital filing system. So if you want that, you just go there, click, and you get that guide. You get also example folders about how to organize your digital projects in a creative field. It's not for a certain field. We give you suggestions, what are the principles, and how to do that. Of course, another great way to support us is by spreading the word about our show with your friends, colleagues, family, or anyone that might enjoy it. And of course, you can follow our social media channels, which are Instagram at TCI Podcast and the LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. All of this you will find below in the description. And if you want to support us, keep going and keep doing the show and bringing better quality. We have a lot of expenses in doing it, and you can do that with $5 a month on Patreon. We have a link below. If you don't want to spend $5, of course you can go on Patreon and choose another amount of money. For now, you can consider this our street artist digital hat where you can drop some money, and as soon as possible we'll be creating also some perks for our patrons and announce it. But enough with introductions. Thank you very much and enjoy the conversation with Matt and Drew.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hello guys, how are you doing?
We're doing all right.
We are doing another, I like to call them threesome podcasts with Matt and Drew from Austin, Texas. So it's also very cool to have an intercontinental chat with someone from the US. So guys, you can introduce yourself a little bit, what you do and who you are.
I'm Drew Teague. I own a company called Wrightsmith Studios, and I do design and fabrication and a whole lot of other stuff.
Cool. I'm Matt Alvarez. I own Soundshade AV Solutions. Pretty multifaceted, kind of audio-visual integration solutions. Probably best well known for doing studios, recording studios, podcast studio, design and build. So
So guys, I'm gonna say the audience like how I found about you, because for me personally it was really cool. As far as I know, you guys are the people behind the newest Joe Rogan Podcast Studio, which looks really dope. And Joe shout out you on his Instagram, and then I saw that some people missed out that news, and I found so to say a little hole in the system to reach to you, and you were super kind to accept my invitation. But this is like just to say how I found about you. But I have a lot of questions because I'm really interested in the podcasting world and the studio production. So to also discover a little bit how it works in the US, because I think that the US are far ahead compared to Europe, for example, for the simple fact that here also we have so many languages, and there are so many podcasters that are niche in their own country. And one of the reasons I decided to do mine in English is that I think it's really interesting also for the US audience to hear a podcast from Europe in English. It's a little bit more exotic maybe for you guys. And I'm curious, how did you started doing what you do? Did you start, for example, Drew, did you start purely as with the intention of building studios, or because your company looks more like you're a craftsman, so to say, looks at least like that?
Yeah, and that's, I've always been someone to work with my hands and create things physically. And that was the whole focus of my company. And then through one of my clients, found this opportunity to work with Matt, and we sort of built this new organization and new business focus out of this partnership that we've created.
And Matt, what is your background? How did you gather the knowledge to set up these systems and this whole knowledge, so to say? Because as someone that produces this stuff, and I started really from zero, it's not easy.
Right. Yeah, it's it's a pretty long history of everything from doing music to building my own studio back around 2010, maybe 2011, and then moving in different areas in the AV industry, working in home automation, commercial AV, production, obviously, recording artists, and just general dialogue. So I've kind of always been in it. And when the opportunity came to start doing my own thing as a business and not working for an employer, I kind of jumped on it. But to be quite fair and quite honest, I didn't really plan on getting into building studios as a career. It just was the path of kind of least resistance at the time. And I think really the main point that solidified it for me was finding Drew and then kind of building a team. And I think that's really the thing. It wasn't about what the vertical or the industry was. I think it was just a lot more fun to work with the team and create something. So.
Yeah, and I think from my experience, because I have been talking to a lot of people from different creative fields, it's like most of the people never started with the idea, I'm gonna make a business. They just have this passion, or somehow their life happened to drive them towards that thing, and then with the process turns into something profitable. But do you have some college degree or university degree into this to learn all these things, or it was just by doing?
Yeah, there's no degree. I mean, I had moved towards getting some certifications for different specialized things in like commercial audio and home automation. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel that certain individuals thrive more when you're in a situation where you have to just kind of do it and figure it out. I think the tactile notion of kind of falling on your face and trying to learn the just all the mechanics of how everything works, I think there's a lot of value to that. I think had I gone to college or had any formal training in anything from recording to design, I might have felt a little bit stifled by it. I might have felt like I couldn't really focus on just letting kind of my mind do what it does, because I know there's a lot of parameters people put on those types of creative outlets, and so yeah, I think it's a great thing to have a foundation in knowing the fundamentals of design and audio, but sometimes you get kind of trapped in a box and you're following certain rules, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm I'm a trained designer or trained audio engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know. I think there's something really beautiful about being able to just kind of let your mind do what it does, and if people love it, awesome, and not everybody's going to love what you do. So,
yeah, like
sorry, I don't have my degree, but I went to school for mechanical engineering, actually. Very interested in technical, things like that. And mechanical is a very physical, design-based thing. And I lived in Los Angeles at the time. Did very well in my program. My second year, I was supposed to get a internship at NASA's Jet Propulsion Labs. They had an undergrad internship program, and I was very excited to do that. And right before my term there was to begin, the program sort of dissolved, and it was very disheartening for me after having worked so hard to try to achieve that. And I sort of shifted directions. Rather than finishing my degree, I sort of took control of my own destiny and started my first company out in Los Angeles, and did a lot of cool design and fabrication. I built some props for some productions and sci-fi stuff like that. So it was really fun, interesting types of things. And that sort of was like my stepping stone after moving to Austin to launching the company that I'm doing now. So.
But are you guys are you from Texas in general, or you just moved in there?
Matt's from Houston. I grew up in Kentucky and Pennsylvania, and then lived in California with my wife before we moved out here to Texas. I've been in Texas about 7.5 years now.
Okay. So by now it's a pretty long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can totally imagine that, because mechanics engineers is also something that teaches you how to think about how putting together materials and how to make things stand in terms of statics, although mechanics is about motion, but it's still engineer thinking. And I'm curious about how did you start up this business? Because in your case, I'm always been fascinated by this kind of businesses, because it involves also a lot of machinery, right? Like, was it a big investment? I always ask these things to my guests, like, how did you start and where did you get the money from? Because the whole idea is, if other people want to do the similar thing, to imagine what is the effort behind it.
Yeah, for me, it was, each of my careers, this is, you could say my third career throughout my life, has been based on a hobby or a passion of mine. I was a musician in my earlier 20s, and then worked in the motorcycle industry while I was in school, and then after I decided to launch my first company, and now with fabrication, woodworking, metalworking, and stuff like that. They were always hobbies of mine to begin with. So as a hobby, you invest your personal money into things and you build up over time. So as something I just like to do in my spare time, I was able to accumulate some equipment and hone my skills before my income was dependent on those skills and equipment. So that's how I did it, and it worked very well.
It started like a side hustle, so to say.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, was there like a point in time where this whole studio, like this market for studios, boomed in the US? What time did you started, guys, to do this whole things with studios, and what kind of clients you generally have? Because here in Europe, I don't know, like the people which are doing podcasts right now, which you know about, it's mostly like some famous people that are already established and they just have the connections inside maybe TV production or, you know, and they come from there. What kind of clients do you get, guys?
I would say our clients are, being such a young company, it's hard to quantify, where our clients lie in terms of, being, established or famous and just kind of general business entrepreneurs. We're seeing both. We also have a lot of clients who reach out to us that are, guys who just love podcasts and want to kind of elevate their production into a place where they can kind of be seen more than just be heard. Because I think, there's so many podcasts out there right now, and everyone's feeling the pressure to do something different than somebody else. Now, I don't know when that shifted, again, because we're such a young company. Pretty much started last year in August when Drew and I met. So we saw a huge, influx of requests based on people who didn't really know where else to look until they heard about us through, the first studio we did together with Joe. So it's been interesting to see the demographic that reaches out to us, because it could literally be anybody, and we're not really limited to just podcast clients. We do clients who need recording studios, like full-scale production studios for recording music. But on the podcast vertical, it's a lot of our clients have been just general business clients, like they have their own businesses, they're entrepreneurs, and their platform is basically teaching people or interfacing with a large amount of clients at one time through their videos, whether it's like a subscription-based model or whether they're just like a general motivational type speaker. It kind of runs a pretty large gamut, and I'm sure as we grow as a company, we're going to see that growth in the different verticals that our clients have too. So it's kind of a hard question to answer, because everybody's doing a podcast. Some people do podcasts about, I don't know, snakes. I don't know. Like other people do podcasts about how to become a Fortune 500 business, So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that. And maybe in a year we can answer that question a little bit better.
I can tell you that someone that's in Europe, and I listen, I guess 90%. So I listen one Bulgarian podcast, maybe one Italian podcast, and then only American podcast. My girlfriend, she's from the US. She has lived there most of her life. What I envy to the United States is this things that people are more open to new things. They open to try new things. You personally have had several businesses which maybe have failed, and here we are very judgeful. So like we in the sense that if you try something and it doesn't succeed, you get a lot of shit talk from everybody, and they're like, I told you you're, and also like people, for that reason, there is no such a market for this online courses or motivational speakers, because people hear like, this guy's not legit. I'm not gonna like, if it's something legit, it's gonna be on the traditional maybe TV and things, and slowly now there are YouTubers more, but if one guy's YouTuber in Germany, nobody knows him, for example, in France, because he speaks German, and the cultural differences are huge. Like when I came from Italy to Germany, it was completely different culture. So it's really crazy. But so you met like in August, and your first project was Joe Rogan's studio?
Yeah, correct.
How did that happen? I'm curious. Like, are you like, because if that was your first project, you're not some established company. So was it just by accident that Joe found you, or how did that happen? This project?
I think we just happened to have mutual connections with Joe. Not to go too far into detail, I think a lot of the information's already out there, but it was just one of those things where The way I tell people this is, you have those opportunities in life where you get that one call and you basically have to just in that moment say, okay, I'm ready to do this, or I'm not the person to do it. And I think for both of our situations, or maybe speaking for both of us, we just both determined that we wanted to do something great, I guess. You talk about you had mentioned something about how people over there will judge you if you fail, and I think the same is kind of across the board for all countries. I spent a lot of my career with people telling me I couldn't do things, or you're a kid, people tell you, oh, you can't do that because you're too small, you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough, or whatever it may be. And so my career has always been driven by not just proving people wrong, but bettering myself. And I think when the opportunity came, it was just another opportunity to do something that I could just be proud of, and really, really push myself to do something unique and different. So I think it was a culmination of being at the right place at the right time, just generally having the confidence to say yes before you even knew how you were going to do it, and then knowing that you have a support system behind you, like people that you could trust and call to get it done, and it all just, the rest just kind of fell in place. But the opportunity was, again, like they say, just kind of like one in a million, and if you walk away from it, then you're the guy on the couch eating potato chips saying that could have been you.
Yeah, that's a good thing to say. It's at the end of the day, at the end of your life, you should have the least regrets possible. And that's all about entrepreneurship too. When the right situations comes, that you say yes. And then if you're not sure, you figure it out along the way. I mean, the worst case scenario, it goes wrong, and it would have gone wrong anyways if you have said no. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be like, I don't want to ask you any questions about things that you don't want to reveal. I don't know if you have had to sign some sort of disclosure agreements or whatever. I mean, I'm not going to ask you where the studio is or stuff like that, because I know that in LA it was quite secret where it is. I mean, yeah. But I'm curious because this is something that most of the people see the outcome of, because we tend to watch quite a lot Joe Rogan. What is what is, for me, it's interesting, the creative process. So you guys, one of you, it's responsible for the construction, like for the how it looks like, and I suppose the other is more about the technology, like audio side. So once you got, like, I don't know if it was Joe in person that contacted you, or he has probably an entourage that contacted you, did they tell you like, hey guys, we want this kind of studio, can you build? How did the process look like? This kind of process, like, because you can say I want a studio and it can be anything.
Yeah, well, for me, it was one of my clients that I was currently working on a project was actually his first guest in Texas, and said, hey, can you do this? I was currently working on a project for him, and he said, I'll put my project on hiatus if you can do this. And I said, of course I can. I'd love to work with him. And as soon as I hung up with him, Joe Rogan called me, and I spoke with him, and we worked out the details. Now, in the first studio build, my responsibility was just the big oak table. So I built the table, integrated some of the electronics, and delivered it, of course, in the time frame. And we, in the new studio build that we just completed, transferred that over to the new studio. But that the main advantage, the big takeaway from that first build for me was, of course, meeting Matt and connecting with him. And then when he had another studio that somebody contacted him to build, he needed somebody to do some of the physical build out in the space, and he called me, and I said, yeah, let's do it. And we've kind of clicked and worked really well together creatively. When we're coming up with design ideas and stuff like that, we go back and forth and can build really cool ideas really quickly, which is something, not everybody has that synergy when they work together. So we knew this was something cool that we should pursue.
Yeah, I mean, and all that, it's every client's a little bit different with that particular project. The first one was similar in a lot of ways to the second studio we did for Joe. I mean, again, the biggest thing for us is, Joe is a great client, and he's a friend, and I think we don't like to dive too much into the details of it just because we respect his privacy, and there's a lot that could be misconstrued, and people like to talk, and the internet's a big place. So if there's anything I will say, I think that the process for that is very organic, which is awesome. You don't always get that with a client. In most phases, and this might be going through your head and the listener's head right now, is like you would think that there's a lot of like, okay, we're going to go into discussion, we're going to pick colors, we're going to pick textures, we're going to pick lighting, we're going to go into all that. And I think with clients like Joe, what we love about working with these clients is that it's very much kind of just touch and go, a general idea of what would look good, and then just kind of implementing it based off of having some creative liberties and freedoms. And yeah, I mean, the process is really smooth. It's usually just like, hey, I think this would look great. How long would this take? And, can we get a hold of this, and this? And what would work best for, my producer? And he kind of just some very loose-ended parameters, and then we just kind of go at it. What Drew will do is for any client, put together a 3D rendering of the space based off of square footage and just what we determine are the preliminary design elements. And then we'll present it to the client, and the client will either say, yes, I love it, or let's reapproach it. And sometimes he hits it like on the head the first time around, which is the easiest thing, obviously. And then sometimes we get clients who we get into indefinite conversations, and we never get, we've got one that's been going on for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, maybe something like that, just on the design side. And I think that's okay. Not everybody's going to be able to visually see it until you actually do it. But to kind of circle back around, yeah, I mean, the process was very much about like, hey, this is what I like, and just kind of go at it. And, we told them, it's like, okay, cool, awesome. And as you get to know your client more, you kind of get to know like what's going on in their head, what to avoid, what to not overcomplicate. I think everybody thinks that when you build a studio, it needs to be this very complex process. And in some regards, it does when it comes to the technology, depending on who the stakeholders are, like the producers and the technical, guys. But for us, we have to merge both the technology and the design in a way that makes sense on camera, and not just the room itself. So some clients want a room that looks amazing and people can come in and feel like wowed by it, and some people just want to know that what's seen on camera is going to look really good, and no one's ever going to know that it's a garage or a spare bedroom or something.
Yeah, but from what you explained about the process of building these studios, and I wouldn't be expecting that building Joe Rogan Studio, it would be the kind of person that needs a bunch of color material picking and stuff like that, because I think that the beauty of his show, it's that it feels homemade. Like I have this feeling because I don't know, guys, if you know, but I've been born in Bulgaria. Then I've moved to Italy. I live most of my life there. I have, in fact, also an Italian passport. And then I moved now to Germany. And in Italy, we love this homemade thing, like the homemade feeling. And this podcast, it's so cool, in my opinion, because it's still very raw. It's like, I don't know, I've watched other shows from the US, which are maybe different kind of show, like There is this more political podcast, so to say, like Ben Shapiro, or I think it's called David Pacman, which is basically the liberal version of. They're very like, feels like a TV studio for YouTube. And the cool thing of that other podcast is that it's still a very like, I don't know, homemade situation where you get to really listen all the famous people that participate in a different way that you would expect them in a TV. So that's not really. I don't think that would have been the case. It would have been very unsuccessful. And actually, this first weird red studio where I saw the table for the first time was, for me, was really funny because it's totally makes sense, some weird shit. But I'm curious on the technological wise side, when you do this, for example, when you work on this one, then we're going to move on the general process. Again, I don't want to know anything about the privacy or stuff, but for example, do you work with, for example, young Jamie is the producer? Does he tells you, okay, we need this gear and you need to fit them, or you suggest something new? How does that work? Because they have technological knowledge somehow.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, I think it's pretty low key on that end. Jamie's got it all pretty dialed in and sorted out. You know, they've been doing this for a long time. So, you know, they kind of just, they knew what they were doing when they moved everything, you know, over here. So what we try to do is just provide alternatives if it ever comes up in conversation. But, you know, we definitely provide like infrastructure, you know, cabling, wall plates and stuff like that. But, you know, again, Jamie's been doing this with Joe for so long that they've got what they like, and, you know, they kind of have access to anything they want to try and stuff. So we, you know, with that situation, we're just there for whenever they may need something on the technology side. We do integrate some of the, you know, obviously the cabling, getting the TV, getting all that set up. Some clients outside of that, you know, it would be different with most clients because most clients don't know where to start. So they're YouTubing everything and trying to figure out, okay, like, but they get to the microphone, right? They see what they need just from knowing what a podcast looks like, and then they start there. But then they don't realize that the rabbit hole it turns into when you want to add any little thing like video or streaming or recording or redundant backups, like it becomes, I can imagine for a lot of clients, very overwhelming. Whereas with, you know, Joe or people who have an established show for years, it's really easy for us to just kind of make suggestions, and then, you know, if they don't need it, you know, we trust that, hey, you know, they've got everything figured out. So
yeah, and as someone that has no production team and I started really from zero because my background is in architecture, and I'm not a person that enjoys being on video but I thought, okay, podcast is something I really like. Why only listen? And I think I'm very talkative, so I think that that's the first requirement. But the hard thing to start doing a podcast is really figure out. In my case, was to figure out the way to buy the least wrong gear, because no matter what, if you start from zero, you don't know nothing, and then you need to buy something that in the end of the day won't be the best buy, and that's the least mistake you can do. It's the best for your money, for your pocket. But what is the range of budgets that people come to you have for a studio? Because of course, if I come to you guys or someone way more, I don't know, an entrepreneur which has already a maybe big presence or wants to invest in it, what is the range a podcast production studio varies in your client's range, so to say? If you can say some, you don't have to say exact numbers, something roughly. I've had clients come to me personally on the podcast side and just say, hey, like, we've got $5,000 to work with,
what can we get a full overhaul of our studio? And $5,000 unfortunately won't get you where you need to be on the design side, right? I think for any startup podcast, $5,000 is more than enough for somebody who just wants to be at home and can kind of decorate themselves and get like a camera and a mic. And so I would say on the lowest end, we even have clients who come in and just say, hey, I've got a setup, I bought all this stuff, and we don't even know how to set it up. So we'll have clients come in and just ask us to consult for them, and can you come in and obviously pay us hourly with our consulting fee, and just say, we just need some guidance. And then we have clients who sometimes have maybe about 20 grand, 30 grand, and they want like a full build out, and we have to make compromises and say, okay, well, it all depends. Like, do you want one camera? Do you want 3 cameras? Do you want switching? Do you want, how in depth do you want to go with the lighting? So, we've had a lot of different like variable budgets, and I would say, once you get to the top end of those budgets, obviously it becomes a little bit easier to justify, the right gear and be able to like know this is going to be something that's going to be long lasting. Whereas some people with, who don't really have an idea of what their budget is at first, they'll go out and they'll just buy a bunch of stuff from Best Buy or Amazon, and they'll get frustrated because, one, they don't know how it works to begin with, and then 2, it wasn't really made to work to begin with. So now they've got cheap stuff just sitting around and they're frustrated, and they kind of, I don't know, I guess people do end up giving up if they don't have a clear idea of what that journey looks like. I would say that to kind of piggyback off of that question, I don't believe there is a right or wrong budget. I believe that there's the right conversation to set expectations for any budget, because I don't think that you can just sit there and say you need $40,000 to be creative. Like, that's not true. There's, you could do it with $500 and start your podcast. When I got into videography and I started doing video work, I'm the type of person who wants to buy everything right off the bat, and I just want to just dump money and throw money at it, and I'll get good at it if I. And that's also not true. Like, it takes a very particular individual who's dedicated to like getting good at something. So no amount of money you throw at something is going to make your podcast good. Like, it's really the talent, it's the guest you have on there. There's so many other factors that account into budget. And honestly, like, a lot of that budget should probably be put into you and like figuring out like what you want to talk about, what your content's about. Like, if you're very politically driven, like, you got to be good at talking about, you got to know your stuff, because you go out into a sea of other people who are doing political podcasts, you say one wrong thing and you've got some traction, you're done. So yeah, I think the budget question is really hard to nail down, because we get that question all the time from the clients going into it, and we don't really know what to say, only because we don't know about the client yet. We don't know what their needs are, we don't know who they are, and as we get to know them better, we can kind of figure that out.
No, but I was curious about it because obviously there is no right budget, but because I was curious to figure out what is the market of these products, of these services you offer in the US, because here, as you said, like, I don't know, I don't know, maybe in the US, do you guys have like a lot of friends that doing podcasting? I mean, you're even in the field, so probably yes. But here, like, I have, I don't know, let's say in Germany, I would have 15 close friends and nobody is doing podcasting because it's just not, I don't know, there is no the extreme wave of everybody doing podcast. Even through pandemics, it grew maybe a little bit, but now there is also Clubhouse. A lot of people here are doing Clubhouse, which is a little bit different in my opinion. And yeah, so that was my curiosity, because for example, after 1 year, my podcast, which is really homemade, the production cost already 2,000-3,000 euros, because it's like I'm also a person that likes to buy stuff, but I started with simply my phone and in my wardrobe, talking by myself, because I wanted to understand if I like the process, instead of crashing a lot of money and then be like, oh, this is I don't like it. So yeah, so you can start with your phone. But design wise, the process, I'm also curious, maybe Drew, you can say more a little bit about it. How does it work? Like, people come and say, okay, we have this room, this is, I don't know, a room, and figure out how it can look like. Or
yeah, absolutely. And it does start with some of the more boring technical aspects, such as the size of the space, and sometimes that's defined. The guy's like, this is my office that I'm converting into a studio in my home, and this is what we have to work with. And we have to look at the building infrastructure. Can we get power in for lightings and stuff like that? So there's some technical stuff we have to consider before the design even happens. And sometimes the studio is purpose built and it doesn't exist yet, and we're going to be constructing it from scratch in any way that we see fit. So then we have to look at the content really sort of dictates what the space needs to be. So familiarizing ourselves with what this client is producing. Are they just standing in front of a camera and ranting about things, or do they have a 5-6 people in a discussion? These things all determine what the set needs to function as. Do they have? Are they looking at videos or reviewing media on a screen that they need to interact with? Doing remote versus in-person interviews. That's sort of like the technical aspect. And then from there, just like with any interior design of a home or an office or anything like that, understanding the personality of the client. What do they like? And I've sort of devised this rubric. Do they like more classic or more modern? Do they like fine details or coarser details? Natural materials, synthetic materials? And so on those scales, you can sort of start bringing a picture into focus of what the person likes. And as a creative, we always like to have something new, something innovative that we haven't seen before. And some people are very excited by that, and the clients will be like, wow, that's so cool. And some people, run back to their corner and in fear of these new ideas, and you have to reassess and kind of bring them something a little more universally palatable, and they'll come around. So that's sort of the general creative process with designing a space.
And how much of your process is actual like planning, and how much is building? Because also, like, what I've seen now with the Joe Rogan Studio was an example, just because you posted up some renderings. What kind of software you use, or how much pre-planning there is, and how much is hands-on? How do you approach it, this thing?
Well, and that again depends on the client. Because of the wide range of what we do, we have a decent team of people with a wide range of talents. And we have to assess for each project, okay, who's going to have more or less responsibility throughout the course of this project. An example, on one end, we have a European client who's just having us do the design and the technical markups. We're not going to physically be on site ever. So we've been working with that company to bring an idea and a vision to life, and then also give them the technical knowledge to get everything set up so that they can begin their production. And then some of them, on the other end, there's very little design. Say they're an audio-only podcast. They're not doing any video. They don't need lights. They don't need cameras, but they don't understand how to do acoustical treatments or any of these things. So that's almost all just a physical on-site thing. So they are both projects that we take on, and we have to assess every time what is it going to look like? Which of us are going to have bigger roles?
Yeah, and for this treatment of the room, Matt, do you also play a role? Because, for example, when I'm recording currently, I moved here in the middle of the year, and before that I was living in a different place. And to make the room sound like without echo was like probably one of the hardest things. Rather, like it was way more difficult than, I don't know, figure out which gear to put together and all this aspect we talk about the gear. That's easy because, I mean, if you can educate yourself a little bit if you're a starter and you don't need some extreme high-end level of audio, although nowadays even with, as I said, not a huge budget, that probably couple of maybe in the 90s would have been a TV level. Now you can make it with a few $1,000 or euros. But about the soundproofing, what kind of, like, how do you figure out, okay, what I'm going to put there?
There's usually a foundation for it when you look at a space. It's all kind of contingent on the size and the shape of the space, how high the ceilings are, what the finishes in the space are. There are fundamentals to it that, pretty much anybody would understand, right? You walk into a room and let's say it's all tile floor and drywall ceiling, right? Nothing in the room. It's just an empty room. The moment you go in there and you have a conversation with somebody, you can already tell that room's going to be a problem. If you've ever been to, like, let's say a restaurant and the restaurant has no sound treatment and you're sitting in there and you have one person talking and all of a sudden the next couple and the next table next to you is talking and then everybody else starts talking, people start to get amplified and louder. And the reason why that is because there's no focus to the sound. The sound is just being scattered and bouncing everywhere. And so everyone's fighting to be able to hear each other. So when it comes down to treating a room, your main goal is obviously to alleviate a lot of that reverberation and echo. But at the same time, you want to have a way to focus the dialogue, focus the audio to the listener's standpoint. So there are a lot of handshakes that happen there, right? The source audio, which would be, whatever's coming from your voice, going to the microphone, but knowing that there's going to be a surface behind the microphone that's going to reflect back onto the wall behind you and then back into the microphone. Audio and sound waves are such a nuanced type of animal because going into it, it's intimidating for the everyday user because, you don't know where to start. Most people are going to just hang blankets on the wall, or foam or whatever they do. There's a lot of snake oil out there in terms of companies that sell stuff that say this is going to work. And experimentation for the average user is going to be the best without getting into spending a ton of money. The type of materials that you use, for example, if you're going to use just a curtain, using a thin curtain does nothing. You want to have a tightly porous material if you're going to use anything like that because the thicker the material, obviously, like by transmission of sound, it's going to absorb more. So when we go into a situation with certain rooms, we had one client who had a very small room, but he had hardwood floors, he had a window, he had, the entry door, and everything else was drywall. There was absolutely nothing in there that would have sounded good if we just set up a mic. Just because, when you have a tight space, sound will reflect multiple times in what they call standing sound waves, and those sound waves get stuck and then they start to compound and get bigger and bigger and bigger over time, depending on how loud the source is. So, going into those situations, we really have to assess it and say, okay, anything can really be conducive to an audio environment if treated correctly, depending on what the audio is. You're not going to put a drum set in a room that small and ever be able to achieve a good sound. It's just not going to happen. The amplification and the decibel levels of that are so loud, though it's just going to bounce unless you have just nothing but foam walls, essentially. But for podcasting, it's easy, right? Like you said, you went into your closet with a bunch of clothes and you did it with your phone. And here's the thing, is like, if you're not on camera, no one's ever going to know, because that's going to probably sound pretty ideal, other than, you know, your bottleneck is really the microphone on your camera. So so if you went in there with your SM7B, like I see you're on right now, you know, you're going to sound more focused in the microphone than you would in a bigger room that's marginally treated with just like curtains or a couple foam RLX on the wall or something like that, only because of the nature of, you know, how well the sound's being absorbed and how focused the audio and the sound waves are going into that into the diaphragm of the microphone. So, you know, when we talk to our clients about sound, or they ask me, you know, what can we do to treat this room? It's kind of a multi-stage situation, because we can treat it very well with the right budget and say, okay, we're going to have to treat ceilings, internal walls, even the finish of the wall. There's drywall that's designed to negate reflections of sound as well, but it gets very expensive. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the science behind what we do and having to understand so much about it, because it's not just what people see for face value, you know, because they watch a show and they're like, oh, this looks awesome, but it sounds terrible. And then vice versa, they'll be like, oh, I love the content, they talk about stuff I love, but man, like, the lighting looks terrible, or this guy's skin looks like he hasn't eaten in days. And so with the sound, I know that you know, it's kind of half the equation, depending on what the circumstance is, and getting it to where it needs to be is not as hard as you would think, but it also takes some direction, it takes some guidance, and it also takes the right material and just understanding the nature of the room to begin with. So,
but also the sweet spot is to, for example, in case of a video podcast, it's still to make a studio that has a great sound, but it doesn't look like a studio. Because, for example, I'm like, as you see, I have also some sound blankets. I bought some sound blankets in this room to make it sound better. And we were doing this trial and fail thing here at home to figure out where to record and where is the best. And we bought some foam, and we had extra design challenges because we are in a rented flat. So in Europe, in Germany, you have to leave the flat as you took it. So you have to, you know, be like, we couldn't do holes in the wall. We couldn't do a lot of things. So we needed to figure out how to do it with a minimal impact on the thing. And it didn't. The first try, of course, didn't work out. Was bad. So we needed to switch rooms, try new things. And my girlfriend was helping me, and then when we saw the first episode in the newest Joe Rogan Studio, she was like, "Damn, how did he soundproof that shit?" It looks, because he has this wooden wall back to him. So for me, this is an aspect that you guys probably also know how to, you know, work with. Because I don't know, is, for example, this wood on the walls, is this better, or because it's irregular, the sounds doesn't bounce? What small tricks you can use in this design process to achieve this sweet spot, though not everything is foamed, but it's still good?
I think it's all about, the magic comes in like what's off camera, the things you don't see, right? Wood, in a sense, you know, it's a much more porous material. It's not going to be like, let's say, the brick that you're used to seeing, or just a generally flat surface. But it's also not ideal unless you're building it as a diffuser, which you can build acoustical treatments that are designed that leverage wood as a hard surface, but also scatter sound waves. But the secret to really treating a room is making sure that everything off camera is well treated. If you're going to have, let's say a square or a rectangular room, have carpet, treat the ceiling, because now you have opposing surfaces that are both absorbing sound. If you're stuck with just doing the wall behind you with curtains, or in front of you with curtains, bring those curtains off the wall. Don't that's the thing, is like people will put the curtains and they'll just hang them on the wall, right? The more you take those curtains off the wall, the sound has to transmit through the curtains, but if it's close to the wall, it just bounces right off the wall. If you pull those curtains off the wall about 6 to 12 inches, now you're creating a gap of air between the hard surface and the curtains. So now that sound has to travel between that same surface, but with more time between the time it can actually be diffused or absorbed. So there's a lot of simple, fundamentals that go into how to treat something while also designing it to function as something that's on camera as well. And even the microphone takes a huge play into, how far you are off of the microphone. If you were on your SM7B and you turn it way up and you're sitting 3 feet away, it's probably you'll definitely hear an inherent difference between how thick your voice sounds just because of the way that a microphone's designed to function. There's a moving coil in there, and so when that diaphragm moves, if your voice is right on it, there's a lot of like low end frequencies that it can pick up a lot more efficiently, because those frequencies travel different than higher frequencies or mid-tone frequencies. So yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of different things that work in tandem or work in conjunction together. And the more you understand those things, the more you can kind of work with a room that's not necessarily ideal for sound.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, because as I said, as someone that I don't know if you even can find such a service within Europe. Now I saw that here in Frankfurt there is like production school, and you can get a basic production master also for podcasting. It costs like 600 euros, and you have to attend, I don't know, maybe it's a couple of weekends, but it's basically things that I guess it's the same things I've learned throughout a year, which I was obsessed with. And I think that I love this way of doing things in the US with the broadcasting, because, for example, one big discussion which we have had here in Europe is, now that we have had the lockdown, schools were shut down, so every single kid should stay at home and needed to learn throughout Zoom or Google Meetings or Teams, whatever. And then I figured out there was this guy on YouTube called Tom Buck, or Tom Buck, I think it's not Tim Buck. And he's a teacher in high school, and he teaches media. And so he set up a streaming studio in the school, and the teachers, I guess, were streaming from there. And I think this was a very cool idea to, stream to the kids in a more professional way, so that it's more entertaining. If you watch something with nice lighting, with multiple cameras, and you have also, I guess, as a young person, you have also somehow of more respect of the teacher, because you say, okay, they did this thing and it's cool, looks cool, so it's more pleasant to follow. And within the design, do you have also a lot of integration of, like, once you have designs how it's gonna look like, do you tend to switch how we're gonna integrate all the gear? Because, for example, you don't see a lot of cables lying around and things like that.
Right. Yeah, that's part of the process, is getting the visual, and it's, they sort of influence one another too. We have to have at least a general idea of what needs to be where before we even begin the set design. But then the set design also determines where lights need to be, where do we need to run wiring. So we get that sort of general framework in our minds first, and then we dial in the design. And then once it's set, we can mark up, okay, we need lighting controls here. We need audio cabling run here. And it's a little more straightforward after we start to shape up certain sections of it. It moves along the process to the point where things are clearer. And
how big is your team a part of you two guys? How many people work behind those projects?
We got 7 or 8 now.
Yeah, about 7 or 8. I think we've grown. We're growing to fit, I guess, what our current needs are and what we kind of see we're running into with every project. We have quite a few larger projects coming up now. We're starting to do a lot more remote projects and some projects where we're going to have to travel. So as that happens, we'll have to be a lot more cognizant of how we leverage our own team. Because if half of our team is traveling to go do an install in another state or across the country, we have to make sure that we have enough resources still for local projects or other design projects that we're working on. So we've tried not to grow too quickly. One of the immediate needs for us was to have people who we could really transfer a lot of our knowledge to be out in the field, to be able to do all the installation, to be able to get all the infrastructure in place, cabling, plates, acoustic material, all that stuff. And then that way, our day-to-day for Drew and I has turned more into the client interfacing with design, answering questions, getting them through configuring equipment and procuring the right equipment. And then obviously working with new clients and qualifying them and finding out what their needs are. And so, yeah, our team has grown based off of what we've seen on every single project. We definitely, you had mentioned, our service is very, very inclusive of what you would need to build a studio. Like there's no like question mark for the client anymore as to, okay, these guys can get me to where the gear needs to be, but I don't know, do I hire a GC? We've had that question a bunch of times. And I remember the first couple that Drew and I did together, we realized, we need to find somebody who can like do this physical stuff for us. Because if we're doing all the physical labor and building it out, we're not going to have the opportunity to move on to the next client and get them started with the design, because we're just going to be overwhelmed with that. So we ended up bringing on somebody, Dylan Elm, and he's a construction project manager and just general contractor. And so we told him, hey, we'll provide you with everything you need from the drawings to the renderings. And then that way he can procure any of his labor that he needs to get it implemented. And then we also needed to bring on an AV engineer, Andrew Lloyd, because his proficiency was with higher, like larger scale AV integration and design. So he's more based in like commercial. So like, let's say you go to like a large commercial building and you see all the speakers and distributed audio. So you've got music playing through the entire space, lighting from a control system, all that. Him and I have very similar backgrounds, but that's his kind of core competency. So we really needed somebody to come in, have second eyes on things, and mark up CAD drawings and things like that, so we could call out electrical and drops for XLR or DMX or just coax. And so yeah, I mean, we really filled in the needs that we saw from every single studio, and it's not always the same across every studio. Some studios are something Drew and I can just do ourselves, if it's like just a home studio or something. And then the bigger studios, it's nice to have a full crew. So we have some installers now. We're bringing on some project management, some back-end operation stuff. So I would say Drew's pretty accurate. I think we have about 7 or 8 people fully involved now. So
how was teaming up? Because from what I understood, you got to know each other and shortly afterwards, you started collaborating together, working together, and doing this common project. So I'm curious because I mean, business-wise, I don't know what is the general culture on your side of the world, guys, but here, you know, as I said, we're pretty conservative in a sense that we tend to mistrust people and be like, if I don't know a person, it's gonna be harder to create a closer collaboration as yours in a short time. You know, like it's easy if we're friends or if we know each other or if we have been working already for some years together. And I say, okay, this guy, I know him, he's reliable. We can start a joint venture together. But how was for you, like, guys? How did you tune up so quickly together?
I mean, it was pretty organic. We, like I said, on Joe's first studio, we just sort of met in passing, you know, and we're on each other's social media just because of the, you know, the social media push that we got early on. And it was really just because Matt started getting a lot more inquiries to do studios, and he said, I need people that can do some of these other things. And because I had worked with Joe, he said, let's try this guy out. And it was the first weekend we worked together, we really hit it off. You know, we get along really well. Our personalities are very compatible. We're both musicians. We like a lot of the same kinds of music and stuff like that. So, you know, you sort of develop a bond with someone in that way very quickly. And then even on the creative end of things, where with that the first collaboration that we did, we started bouncing ideas off each other and bringing them up to speed. And we were both like delighted at how quickly we were able to develop an idea back and forth with one another and turn it into something really cool. And we just decided to run with it, you know?
Yeah. And I would say the hardest part about like finding, you know, building your team and finding people you work well with, the culture is the most important thing to me, right? I think that you can hire or you can collaborate with really skilled, extremely proficient individuals. But what ends up happening is, like, if you can't get through a complex situation and enjoy each other's company while doing it, it's not sustainable, you know? And I think with how much Drew and I had in common, you know, we kind of brought that into the equation when we started working with other people. You know, I would say almost everybody on our team are musicians. And, you know, some people I've had history with, either working with them in the past or just being friends with. And when you have something that is as unique as what we do, you get a lot of buy-in from the get-go. If you can create a situation where people believe in your mission and what you're doing, it's easier to determine who's going to be serious about, you know, the projects, who's going to be serious about the long-term commitment that it takes to build a company and build a venture. And that's the hardest thing to do when you start a business, is getting that buy-in, especially if you don't have a project like Joe's or some of these really cool projects. But, you know, if I came up to you in public and said, hey, come work for me, or come work with me, which is how I present it. I don't ever ask people to come work for me. I don't like that idea. I think that you need to kind of treat everybody with some sort of value. And if you can create that value and tell people like, hey, we're part of something as a whole, we're like the sum of many parts, you're not just an employee, that creates a value in the culture as a whole as well. And that's when you start to get buy-in. That's when you start to get people. And, you know, there is always going to be apprehension about who you work with, because you don't know how it's going to work out, especially if you've never worked with them before. But I think anybody who has eyes and ears and a mouth can kind of determine, you know, right off the bat how you feel about somebody. You know, like, do I get a good vibe? Do I get a good sense of character from this person within the first 5 minutes? Because when you go into it not thinking you absolutely need this person because they have a skill that you can't live without, if you go into it as we're going to grow together as a team and we're going to learn these things together, and we may not be the best at A, B, and C, but we'll get there and we'll find the right people. That's when, you know, you just have a team of people who just want to be in the same room and collaborate. And so we've been fortunate enough to have that process go very smoothly, and just be able to work in synchronicity together and just have it feel organic and have it feel like we're all on the same page, moving in the same direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's I can say it as someone that's an employee and not an employer. That's really important to have this feeling to be part of something bigger than yourself, because when you have this culture within your company or organization, then everybody has this will of extra push, because they feel like part of something bigger, and every project feels your own also. So nobody wants to make a bad job, and everybody wants to in the end of the day to look good in front of the eyes of the clients and in front of the clients of the other members of the team. And I think this is what I hear every time I interview people from the creative world, no matter which part of the world they are from, that it's really important to generate this right culture that everybody works with each other and not for each other. Because in my opinion, if you're an entrepreneur, you're nothing without your team, and your team is nothing without you. So it's equivalent. But also I'm curious, like, because of your so specific business now, is it hard to find people with expertise in this field that are willing to join your company? Or because you know you're already in the field, but because you said also you play music, it's not that you're starting just right new in the whole thing? Do you know a lot of people already, or how is it the job market in this field?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, this one thing we've learned is from every client, what we do is so specialized, I suppose, because of the fact that it's all inclusive. And it takes a lot of very multifaceted knowledge to be able to do that all in-house. Not to say that this is something that we have 110% understanding on every single aspect of video and audio and acoustics and whatnot. You know, I'll be the first to say that, like, I have done it all just because I've always been interested and involved in different areas of AV. Trying to find somebody else who's kind of that way, you know, you'll kind of see where people's proficiencies lie and their backgrounds. Where, you know, Drew's a musician, and Drew has, you know, experience in the studio and obviously with some AV stuff, but Drew's never designed a system that's in a network environment, in a commercial space where you've got distributed audio and yada yada. But Drew shines best when it comes down to his background with engineering, where he can design a space based off of those cues and understand, like, general solutions on how to make, like, something as far as a structure and how to implement those things together. Whereas same thing with Andrew. Andrew doesn't have a high proficiency in, like, videography, where he doesn't understand the same thing with, like, depth of field and focal lengths and how to light a scene and stuff like that. So when we're trying to look for people, or just speaking for myself, you know, I have a lot of that knowledge just based on doing it. And if we need to supplement something, it's more along the lines of having a specialty within our specialized business and saying, Drew is our design engineer. Drew is our design guy. He's going to be the one who really focuses on that, because him and I can collaborate. I'll fill in the gaps of all the other knowledge we need. If it were just me and Drew and we didn't have anybody else, him and I could still be able to knock out a project because of the knowledge between us. But as far as finding other people, that's what we're trying. It's not as hard, because what we can do is really determine, does this person have the integrity, which is the most important thing. It's not the skill. It's like, do they have the integrity, and are they excited about what we're doing? Because then we can determine what they like to do and teach them everything we know, or get them trained, pay for training, whatever it is. And then that's our acoustic installer or acoustical engineer. Like, they really love determining how to make this room sound good. Whereas if we went out and we found an acoustical engineer, it doesn't necessarily do our clients any favors either, because now we have somebody who's a very, very highly skilled, but then it becomes like a huge factor in the budget as well, because now we have this massive number that becomes part of the project. Whereas, we don't necessarily need an acoustician, just because of the fact that, like, we're not doing a big amphitheater. We're not doing like a classical stage set where, we have to have this perfectly treated room to transfer. So as we're finding people, we're finding what their core competencies are. We're finding guys who are just excited about what we're doing, and just really training them and teaching them, and just letting them thrive and flourish in like what they want to do. Because that's me and Drew's job, is to find talent, retain talent, and also help them grow, and if someday they become our competition, then that means we did our job right,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and the field you're working in, it's still so open. So I think it will take a while before someone catch up with the same setup as you guys. I was checking also a little bit the website of Wright Smith, right? And I can see that. I'm curious also, what is your real working setup? Do you have because these pictures I see on the website look some sort of a workshop warehouse where you build actually the objects you then install, at least the furniture-wise object, I guess. Do you have also some office space? How are you set up?
I do, yeah. I actually have 2 shops at my home for physical fabrication. Usually, fixtures. Like I said, I've done these desks. I've done rack systems for studios, recording studios. I've done all manner of different electromechanical builds, as well as, just wood and metal fabrications, which was the core element of my business before I met Matt. And I still do that. I still have the option to add that into one of the designs, so that we say, okay, well, they need something that doesn't exist. Let's create it. Let's make it from scratch. But I have an office set up. I do all my 3D design there, and it's just it's nice to have both, because when I first went to school, when I was a teenager, when I first went to college, I was in computer science because it was a huge industry. This was the late 90s, and computer stuff was blowing up, but I couldn't sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day just typing code. It was not in my blood. I had to do something more physical, something more real. So that's when I got into, of course, mechanical engineering and then fabrication, and I still have that element of where I can get into a virtual space, and there's no limits to what I'm able to conceive there, and then bring that. And if you look at my Instagram, I try to show how I've conceived things in the virtual space, and then brought it to life in one way or another. Or our team has come together to bring a space into existence from something that was just a picture on a computer. So it's every time that happens and I compare one to the other, I'm like, man, it doesn't lose its cool factor for me.
I'm curious, as someone that works also in the field, what kind of software you use for these 3D models you build and all the renderings you do?
I'm using SketchUp Pro, and I'm currently using Twilight Render for my light ray tracing modeling and stuff like that. I've just recently ordered a 3D mouse. I don't know why I waited so long to do so, but I'm excited to start doing a dual mousing setup where I can work a little more efficiently in the space. So
what is a 3D mouse? I've never heard about it.
yeah, they're really cool. It's a left-handed mouse if you're typically using your right hand for your computer mouse, and it allows you. It's not just you don't move the thing. It's got a joystick, so to speak, on it, but it's a 3D movable joystick that you can use to orient your model. Because traditionally you're having to switch functions with your computer mouse, reorient the model, complete the whatever element of drawing or texturing that you need to do, and then orient it again for the next stage. This allows you to separate the orientation, and there's programmable keys for your primary functions and stuff like that, so that each hand is performing one aspect of the 3D model. One is doing the physical drawing, one is doing the orientation to get it where you need to be, where you can do your drawing. So.
And one other thing I'm curious about the design thing, that like the design task that you get. For example, when you did the table for the Rogan Studio, also, what kind of assignment you get? Because, for example, like the table that you built looks really specific in a specific way. By observing it a little on a longer time, I figured out it's really smart to have that vertical element, because it's, for example, it's very smart that you cannot touch your feet with your guest during the talk, which could distract you during a chat, and which could happen when, two people are sitting for a longer time in front of each other, tends to maybe to sit a little bit more comfortable and elements like that. So when you get this task, do you have also like some functionality task, a part of the technical functionality, like having the headphone switch and things like that, or just make a table that looks cool for the Rogan branding?
It's both elements need to be present throughout the whole process. The initial meeting that I had with Joe and his staff, we looked at the dimensions. How big does it need to be? How many people are ever going to sit at this thing? And we made it larger than it needed to be, because he likes to have stuff on the table too. But yeah, having the central support brace was important for the separation, but also not to have it's very narrow. It's only about 4 inches across, such that if he has a basketball star on or something like that, there's leg room there, plenty of space for any size person to feel comfortable at that table. And another thing that we actually had to dial in when we moved it to the second studio was because of that narrow base, and I added triangulation and bracing and stuff like that. If somebody puts a lot of weight on the table, there was some slight vibration, which generally you would never notice, but with a boom mic, it would amplify that motion and you would see the mic wiggle just a touch. So when we moved it, I added some corner bracing to match the style of the original table so that it would be more sturdy. And we did Jamie's engineering table as well in the same materials and finishes as the discussion table, so that it would feel as like a set.
And do you guys have also like some people then hire you as a ongoing consultant? Because you serve different level of people into the field, right? There are some that are maybe more experienced, some other less experienced. Does some people say, okay, build me a studio, set me up the studio, and then along the process, I don't know, maybe I'll hire you on a hourly rate where you actually do some, I don't know, extra consultancy in a sense that, okay, this gear actually you use in this way, or we can upgrade this furniture, or I don't know. Do you have something like this on your, so to say, deals or clients you have had so far, or not yet?
No, I wouldn't say. I think the goal for us is to educate our clients, especially clients who don't have any experience in the space. We want to make these studios as turnkey and as accessible and simple as possible. So at the end of the day, you know, we would like it to be, or at least our clients to feel comfortable to know that like they'll never have to call us again if they don't need to. You know, we want to set them up for success the first time around and say, this is going to be such a simple solution that it can be catered to your needs, but it can also be malleable enough or scalable if you want to add to it later. So, you know, maybe we do get a call later that they want to add, you know, more seating and things like that. So we kind of set it up to be scalable in a sense that when it's finished, you know exactly how it works and it's very simple, but know that, you know, we're here to support you whenever you need. And a lot of times our clients, they kind of just take it and they run with it. And, you know, if we don't hear from them, then that's a good thing, right? Like
Yeah.
if we start getting phone calls all the time, it's probably because something's not working. And if, you know, and like I tell most of our clients, you know, if we only ever get together again just to have drinks and dinner and hang out, you know, that's our main goal is, you know, the clients, they start to feel more like friends and family for sure. So, you know, because we invest a lot of time in them and we invest a lot of time in their vision. And so, you know, because we're a smaller company and because we're very focused on just a finite amount of projects at one time, you know, we do very much get invested in them. So it's not even a matter of like, we need you to pay us to continuously support you. It's a matter of like, you know, we're here for you for whatever you need. You know, let's get through this first process. And if you need anything beyond that, you know, we'll be there. And that's how generally we get our business, is all word of mouth, because of the fact that people are happy with the solutions. And they usually tell their friends, like, whoa, this is so crazy because it's so simple. I push 2 buttons and I can record and I send it off to my producer and it's already good, you know, packaged and ready to go. So, yeah, I mean, as far as being consultants, you know, we're always there for anybody who kind of wants to DIY it themselves and they just need somebody to kind of walk them through the process. But, you know, currently we have, again, a project that out in Europe that's been going on for quite some time. And I think it's mainly because, you know, sometimes you just can't put a hard line end on the creative process. And so if that takes us 2 or 3 years to get it figured out, you know, it's just what we'll have to do, you know?
Nice. And I'm curious also, like, the first project you got, it's like remarkable. It's like, and it's funny because many of my guests, like also in other fields, like I have had a lot of people from the ArcVis industry, which is making these very neat renderings of buildings. For example, some of them have started with some very flashy client. Did this first job that you got give you a little sort of marketing boost, so that, like, you know, gave you a lot of legitimacy to say, okay, these guys built a Rogan studio and we're going to hire them? Or did this lead a lot of projects to you?
Yeah, I mean, it did more than just that. It actually sort of defined what our venture would be. You know, we kind of came together with these various skill sets. And because we were given this high profile project, we said, hey, there's nobody doing this on a full front to back scale that we can find. And this is actually, our European client said this. He said, I've been wanting somebody to do this for over a year now and haven't been able to find it. I've been looking and I happened upon your companies and I would love for you to do this for me too. And so, in fact, one of our more recent clients we had a meeting with, he thought maybe we would just do a set design for him. And he's just getting started in kind of getting his podcast going. And we mentioned that we do AV integration and you know, lighting and full production construction. He was surprised and delighted that we were even offering that. So that was one of the things. It's sort of like, it certainly gave us, I mean, a boost on social media and things like that. but just showing us that this is something that is in demand and there's a hole in the market. There's nobody doing this on any scale. You know, you can hire an AV engineer to get your equipment working. You can hire an acoustician to treat your room, but nobody was offering it as a package service, which is what we've been able to do. And we've found a really good market in it.
And you guys are really, really lucky because I'm listening to the Rogan Experience, and every time he's trying to pull new people in the field to Texas. So maybe it's going to be like really a snowball effect, because all the people that are moving to Texas, I don't know if exactly Austin, but I guess that once you're in the Texas state, for you guys would be easier. You'll have, like, if they ask for suggestions, you'll be on the top of the list. So it's a great opportunity. Also, I read a while ago this book from 0 to 1 that's written from the founder of PayPal. I don't remember one of the co-founders. I don't remember his name. So, which was exactly this, that to make a big leap and big progress in something is just you need to find a small market where you're only you, and then you're good to go, because you don't have so much competition. And I'm curious, by getting a little bit higher a number of projects, do you guys, as leaders of your company, do you still have a lot of time to be hands-on, or it's becoming more and more management?
It's actually been both. I don't know that we're ever going to get to the point where we're not hands-on. You know, we can't, you know, what we do is kind of our own secret sauce, right? We come together as two people who can take a space, and, you know, if it were just Drew and I doing it, we would still be able to provide the same level of, you know, professionalism and like the product as a whole. And so it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of years to kind of garner this knowledge and experience. And so there's going to be a lot of involvement on our end, not just on the management side, but having to be there and teach these guys, or show these guys how this stuff works, and fill in the blanks. You know, you have to think very methodically throughout the entire process of the design as well as implementation, to just take what's in your head or the client's head and get it to fruition, like in a physical form. And so, yeah, I mean, it would be awesome to be in a position where we're not, you know, cutting ourselves up and getting scars and, you know, drills and all that stuff, or, you know, dropping things on our heads. And we're at a point where we're not necessarily out there doing that all the time now. But I think it's the love of it too. You know, you can't, you know, you're never going to get away from your roots of what you did. And again, we're such a young company that, you know, we just want to make sure that there's that kind of quality control in everything we do. We have the luxury to be able to focus on those things, and the time to be able to like really put our all into it. So, you know, I think that, you know, companies start to really diverge from their core business when the people who founded it are no longer overseeing like what makes that business special. It's like basically having like Chef Emerald and basically saying, all right, I'm going to give you all my spices, and you're just going to put it in this package, and then you're going to go sell it at the supermarket, and you're just going to have it mass produced. It's like, you know, we can't do that. We can't mass produce what we do. And we've had people ask us how we're going to do that. And I'm like, how? Like, everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. And Drew and I will always be their first point of contact when it comes to, you know, finding out what they need. And so the moment we start to try and put that in a box, well, then all of a sudden, everybody's podcast is going to look exactly the same. We're kind of at the precipice of, we're really at that point where people want that individuality. Video is such a huge medium in delivering content, obviously, but also delivering unique content, that it has to be overseen very well in order for it to be the final product to be done very well. And so I don't know, I think we'll always feel like a responsibility and accountability for being part of that process.
And I'm wondering, guys, have you, although you're a very young venture, a very young company, have you set for yourself some goals or vision where you wanna go, or maybe some checkpoints for yourself, or for you this setup is like optimal and you want to like just keep going on this setup?
I mean, we're in a constant state of developing what we do, whether you can see it on the surface or not. Even just on the back end, as far as like managing our projects more efficiently as we bring more people onto the team, you know, making sure that our communication with our team members is as open as possible and as clear as possible, you know, things that any company would have to deal with. And as we clarify the range of services that we will offer, dialing in exactly what those look like, because there's this balance that needs to be achieved between what Matt was talking about, not trying to make a cookie cutter solution for everybody, you know, which is very efficient. And some businesses, their goal is to do that, find this sort of average of what somebody might need, mass produce it, reduce your overhead, make a bunch of money. But that's not, like I said, we're creatives. We don't want to mass produce something. We want to have an individual experience with each client. We want to do something that is unique for everybody, you know? So being able to find that line where we can make internal processes that will make things more efficient so that we can get to the point more quickly without washing out and leveling the creative aspect to the point where, okay, we got this guy, we're going to put these panels up, we're going to tell him to use these cameras and these mics, you know, what's his favorite color? Okay, we're going to do the wall in that color. Done. You know, that's not what we want to do. So we're achieving this balance of process, being able to duplicate our processes without stifling the creativity. And I think that's sort of like our next goal in what we do, is to find that sweet spot, and we've been working towards that.
I would say, to piggyback off that, and even more so, is like finding a space for us to where, you know, we can collaborate on these projects in a physical area, because, you know, in the pandemic right now, it's kind of, you know, our canvas is the client's, you know, space. So it would be beautiful for us to be able to have, you know, a large warehouse or a really beautiful, you know, like building where we could mock up different spaces for the client so they can come in, see textures, see like a small scale version of what they're wanting to have in their, you know, home or their studio. And I think that's something that we've talked about as well, is trying to figure out what that looks like, whether it's like a WeWork or a co-working space, or trying to find an affordable warehouse space with an office. You know, it's important to me that the client can visually and tactily feel and see what they're getting into, because that's the hardest part of what we do, is getting people excited when they're just thinking about the money. And if we can get to a place as a company where we can get them beyond how much it's going to cost, or, you know, the budget, and we see that with most projects, is that it's hard for them to see the vision before it's put together, even with a 3D model. That's a big goal for at least myself, to try and get us in a space where we can go, and even just a space that's designed, that we design for ourselves, that we feel inspired to kind of create as well. You know, let's get Drew a massive, you know, 50-inch, you know, curved flat panel for, working on, and let's get some really cool cameras in there, so when we do our first meetings with our clients, and we try to do that already, obviously, but yeah, I think if we have something more conducive to how we work and how we collaborate and create, that would be an awesome thing for us. But I think everything's hopefully going to go back to normal in the next 3 to 6 months, and we can get a space to do so.
Yeah, you're gonna get the car dealership effect, because it's like when you're going to buy a new car and you get in the dealership and you see all the models, and they give you the flyers, and they let you touch the samples, pick the interior of the car. And especially, I don't know, men, they get hooked up and they're like, oh, I want my toy. So It would be like a podcasting. I mean, if I had a space like this, for example, here locally, of course, not now because of the pandemic, but if, for example, we have a camera store here in Frankfurt, and I sometimes go in the camera store and just love to watch the cameras because I am passionate about cameras. So if there was like a podcasting studio making place as an exposition, I think a lot of people would go there just to not only clients, but will attract attention, in my opinion. So I think it's a great idea, and I hope you're gonna make it in the next few months that are ahead of us. Guys, I think we have covered most of the topics. I hope you had fun to chat with me. I now tend to conclude all the conversations with different creatives by asking you, like, if there is something that is your favorite medium of inspiration, such as movies, songs, or museums, or places where you like to go, or maybe some hobby that you like to practice. I don't know, you said you like to play music. So what is your inspiration beside your work?
Well, I know for me, it's music. Like I said, we're musicians. We listen to a lot of music, and it was one of the things that Matt and I bonded on, is that we both like soul, Motown type music a lot. And, I'm a firm believer as an artist, there are good and bad artists in every genre. I'm not one of these people that say, I listen to these genres and these genres are no good. I listen to all kinds of music, but, and it rotates. I like new music. A lot of people, when they get, I'm in my 40s now, they get up to my age and they're like, no, the music when I was 18 was the best music ever made, and no music since then has been any good. And I'm like, no, man, I listen to music from long before I was born. I listen to music that just came out. So that's always been my thing. To get specific, there is a song that's been prime real estate in my brain for at least a week now. I wake up in the middle of the night and it's in my head, and it's called Hypotheticals by a band called Lake Street Dive. And it's like this, indie jazz soul kind of song, and it's catchy as all get out. And if you dare listen to it, it will be stuck in your head too. So that's my vote.
Yeah, I would say, music was a huge inspiration for me for a long time. And then I discovered video about 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know what it was, but something about, just not even creating a story, but capturing like a moving image, and how dynamic it was, and how like any little thing could affect like how it kind of struck an emotion, like just like the right shadow on it, or the right lighting, or the right background. I don't know, I became really like, I don't know, I just kind of engulfed myself with video, and always watching movies as a kid. And sometimes you don't really understand the nuances that make you feel a certain way about it. So when I started capturing video a couple of years ago, I went all in, and it was just so much fun doing music videos for people, wedding videos, just anything like little narratives and stuff. And so that's really been a passion for me, just because, I don't have as much time to do it as a hobby anymore. But when I do get to do it, it never gets old, even when I get frustrated, because I like to be like a perfectionist about certain things. it just ties into what I love doing in general. I think that's why I do what I do, because I can be creative and there's not a real limit to what we can do with it. Nobody can put like rules or anything on music and video and cinema and even just creating a podcast studio. I mean, you look at Lex Friedman or some of these guys who just have just a black curtain behind them, and they're some of the most dominant people in the market. I mean, you see their names everywhere. And then you look at guys who are like gamers or like these Twitch streamers who have these elaborate LED light walls behind them and like RGB colors, and it's just like sometimes it's just too much. But I mean, there's a market for anything. I think what inspires me is the fact that there really isn't a limit to any of it, and being able to take audio, something that Drew and I both love, and then merge it with a newfound passion, and then also involve people in general. I think that's what I'm most passionate about, is just the process of working with somebody else and taking a vision and bringing it to life. So
sounds great. So guys, last but not least, you can shout out where people can find more about you and your work online. And I'll be adding, of course, all the descriptions all the links in the description.
All my social media is under Wrightsmith ATX. It's WRIGHT, like the Airplane Brothers. And that's for Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff.
And then I kind of stick mainly with Instagram at the Soundshed Studios page, and then the website is still being built, but it'll be at soundshedAV.com. And then we also have our partners, Elm Construction and Project Management, and TechSavvy, TEXAVY, and they're definitely an integral part of what we do. So
amazing. So I'll be putting all the links in the description, and thank you very much for your time on the weekend. And I hope that soon we'll be building together the Creative Insider Studios.
That would be sick. Nice. We would love that.
Bye, guys.
All right.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hey friends, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. You've been amazing. Before we go, I just want to remind you that if you want to support us, you can just go on the creativeinsider.com, where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, or you can follow us on our social media channels, which are Instagram at TCI Podcast, or the LinkedIn page, The Creative Insider. By doing this, you will have a bigger social media presence, which always looks attractive to more and more important guests. And so this is very fundamental. And if you really love what we do and you want to help us doing a better production, just click on the Patreon link below, where you can support us with the wished amount of money you think it's okay for you. It's a monthly subscription, but you can cancel anytime. So thank you very much and have a good week, guys. Bye bye.